Come on, she's just the janitor. Let her play. We could use a little comedy tonight. The laughter that followed was sharp, effortless, almost rehearsed, like they'd all played this scene before. A room filled with investors, engineers, and media reps cracked smiles over designer drinks, assuming the night's entertainment had just walked in with a mop and a name tag. 42 floors above Seattle, the executive lounge of Orion Tech felt like the belly of a spaceship. Soft lights, steel lines, glass walls that gave a perfect view of the skyline. It was the kind of place where people negotiated million-dollar contracts over espresso and ego. And tonight, it was also the stage for the company's latest showpiece. An AI chess engine named Eclipse, said to rival grandmasters and decode human logic. The CEO, Ethan Vale, with his tailored blazer and classic smirk, turned toward the woman in blue gloves and scuffed sneakers. Claire, right? You game. Everyone chuckled. She didn't. Claire Johnson, 42, janitor, invisible fixture of the building since the beta days. No one asked where she went after hours, why she never spoke, or how her eyes always paused for just a second longer than expected when passing a whiteboard full of code. They just knew she cleaned. But tonight, Claire put down her gloves, walked to the board, and said quietly, "I'll take white." That's when the room got quieter. When the laughter softened into awkward shifting. She moved like someone who'd been here before, not in the lounge, but in the war zone of minds. Not just moving pieces, controlling space, setting traps. 8 moves in, Ethan leaned forward. 11 moves. Someone from PR stopped recording. 13 moves. Checkmate. Claire stood up. Thank you for the game. No celebration. No revenge. Just a woman returning to work after resetting an entire hierarchy with her bare hands. If you think that's where this story ends, think again. Because this wasn't just a chess game. This was the beginning of a comeback. One no one saw coming, but everyone would remember. Claire Johnson wasn't born brilliant. She earned it. Grew up in Tacoma, Washington, 2-bedroom apartment, single mom, 3 younger brothers. Her first chessboard was a laminated printout from a library book taped to a cereal box. Her first computer? A beat-up desktop someone left on the curb with a post-it. Doesn't turn on. She made it turn on. By 16, Claire was writing predictive algorithms for her high school's math club. By 22, she had graduated top of her class at Stanford. At 25, she co-authored a paper on ethical machine learning that still circulates tech blogs today. And then, just as her career was about to explode, it all collapsed. Her mistake wasn't technical. It was emotional. She trusted the wrong person. A fellow researcher. Charming, charismatic, and a thief. He stole proprietary datasets from an internal project Claire led, under her credentials. And when the inquiry came down, she didn't name him. Whether it was pride, guilt, or some twisted sense of loyalty, she took the hit. MIT revoked her access. Job offers vanished. Tech Twitter moved on. And Claire, she didn't fight back. She disappeared. But not far. Seattle had always been home. So she returned, quietly, with no more hoodies from conferences, no more talks at TEDx. Just bills, regret, and silence. Eventually, she took a janitorial job at Orion Technologies, the very company born from the lab she once led. Most people wouldn't last. Claire stayed 6 years. She wasn't invisible, but she knew how to blend in. No one asked questions if your name wasn't on Slack, if your uniform had pockets and bleach stains. But what they didn't see was how Claire spent her nights. How she paused in front of whiteboards covered in equations only half right. How she took mental snapshots of sloppy logic, broken strings, misaligned AI values, and rewrote them in her head while scrubbing bathroom sinks. Or how she sometimes left a sticky note behind, unsigned, with one suggestion. This variable doesn't loop. You're missing a closing bracket. It became a running joke among junior devs. They called it the ghost in the lab. Nobody knew it was her. Least of all, Ethan Vale, the CEO now taking credit for an AI system built on bones Claire had buried long ago. But that's the thing about ghosts. They don't haunt forever. Sometimes, they return. It started like a whisper. A small anomaly in the logs. A function that had been broken for weeks, suddenly fixed. No push notification. No update on the board. Just different. The engineers on level 12 didn't notice at first. Orion's AI project Eclipse was massive. Lines upon lines of code. Tens of thousands of dependencies. A glitch disappearing here or there. Easy to overlook. But when 3 separate bugs vanished in the span of 4 nights, they took notice. The emotional parsing function, once stuck misreading sarcasm, was now predicting tone with pinpoint accuracy. The redundancy in the audio compression algorithm? Gone, replaced by a tighter loop that shaved milliseconds off processing time. No one on the team claimed credit. A quiet panic started building. Jason, a 27-year-old dev with a Red Bull habit and a whiteboard filled with to-dos, was the first to speak it aloud during a morning sync. "Guys, I think we're being edited." Laughter followed. First, but when the team dove into Git history, their faces shifted. There were no commit IDs. No timestamps. Just subtle, precise corrections buried deep in the codebase, like a ghost editor with perfect timing. They started calling it the Phantom Fixer. Memes popped up in Slack. Someone photoshopped a janitor into the background of Mr. Robot posters. "Our code guardian," they joked. But for Claire, none of it was funny. She'd been watching Eclipse evolve from the sidelines for 6 years. Watching it stumble, struggle, miscalculate. Watching it try to become something it could never be, because the people building it forgot the most important part of artificial intelligence. The human behind it. Claire never planned to interfere. She wanted to stay invisible. Do her shift. Keep her head down. Survive. But when she saw Eclipse misinterpret a grief-stricken user's tone as calm, marking the feedback as non-critical, something inside her snapped. That kind of mistake wasn't academic. It was dangerous. So she opened a terminal one night at 2:17 a.m. Just for 5 minutes. She corrected the emotional weight formula. Tightened the context window. Left no trace. She thought she'd stop there. But then the next night, it was the audio streamlining bug. Then the bias flagging system. And so it began. A ritual. Claire would finish her cleaning rounds by 11:45 p.m., brew herself a cup of stale coffee from the level 6 lounge, and sit in the shadow of the AI lab, rewriting code on a machine no one monitored. No name. No fingerprints. Just impact. And then, one night, she left a single line of comment at the top of a particularly clunky module. // you're welcome. Try thinking like a human next time. That line made its way into the internal Slack. Then Reddit. Then Twitter. A user named nocontrol_J posted it under an anonymous handle. The community went wild. Who was this person? How did they get access? Was it a hoax? A genius hacker? A disgruntled ex-employee? Or something else entirely? At Orion, whispers turned to tension. The CTO questioned access logs. Security scanned for breaches. Nothing came up. Until Ethan Vale walked into his office one night and found a sticky note on his desk that hadn't been there that morning. 5 words. Written in familiar, sharp handwriting. Your AI forgot the soul. And just like that, the game changed. Ethan Vale wasn't used to not knowing things. He had built his reputation on foresight, knowing trends before they happened, pivoting before competitors even saw the bend in the road. But this ghost? It gnawed at him. He didn't like being outplayed, especially not in his own sandbox. So that night, after everyone had gone home, Ethan pulled up a secure terminal in his office. No assistant, no CTO, just him, black coffee, and a growing obsession. He started with internal access logs. Nothing out of place. No usernames beyond engineering. Except one anomaly. An unclassified device pinging the system from a janitorial access point on sublevel B1. He ran the MAC address. The badge ID attached? Claire Johnson. He paused. The janitor? At first he laughed. Then he didn't. He typed her name into the internal HR portal. Basic profile. Hired via third-party contractor. No resume. No references. No emergency contact. That was odd. So he went outside the system. Deep search. alumni databases, academic citations. And there it was. A paper from 2013, Bias in Emergent Neural Nets. Lead author, Claire E. Johnson, Stanford AI Lab. He clicked the PDF. Half the logic behind Eclipse was right there. Years before his engineering team ever wrote a line of it. Heart-pounding, Ethan dug deeper. LinkedIn archives, news articles, forum posts from the early days of AI blogging. Claire wasn't just a researcher. She was a rising star. Her posts were quoted by thought leaders. She gave keynotes before she was 30. Then, silence. One article mentioned a quiet exit from MIT over a data leak scandal. Nothing confirmed. No charges. Just a career cut short. She disappeared. Until now. Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring out at the Seattle skyline. Below, the city buzzed like everything was normal. But he knew better. The woman sweeping his lobby? She had helped invent the core of his billion-dollar AI. And now, she was fixing it from the shadows. He tapped a finger against the desk, mind racing. What do you do when the ghost in your machine turns out to be the original architect? Do you expose her? Punish her? Or ask her why she ever stopped building in the first place? Only one way to find out. And the next morning, Ethan Vale walked into the maintenance hallway on sublevel B1. Not with security, not with anger, but with a question he never thought he'd ask a janitor. Claire, can we talk? This wasn't the same room. This wasn't the same game. It was now Tuesday afternoon, and Orion Tech's Investor Preview Hall had been transformed into something halfway between a startup launch and a boxing ring. Rows of plush leather seats lined the room. Spotlights bounced off the glass walls. A large LED screen displayed the words, Eclipse 3.0 versus Human Intuition, a live demonstration. And front and center, a chessboard, carbon fiber frame, digital move tracker, sponsored by NVIDIA and Tesla AI. Cameras were rolling. Reporters whispered. Every major VC on the West Coast had a notepad open, ready to judge the tech they might pour millions into. Ethan Vale stood on stage with his trademark smirk. Calm, confident, curated. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, voice smooth as a podcast intro. Today, you won't just see what our AI can do. You'll see who taught it how to think. He turned toward the entrance. Please welcome Claire Johnson. At first, a ripple of confusion passed through the room. A few glances. A couple raised eyebrows. Then Claire stepped onto the stage. No janitor uniform. No mop. Just a charcoal gray sweater, worn jeans, and a posture that said, I didn't come here to ask for permission. Some in the audience murmured, Isn't she? Wasn't she cleaning the lobby last month? She ignored them, walked straight to the board. Ethan sat across from her, nodded once. She nodded back. One game, he said, loud enough for the mic to catch. Winner defines the future. No preamble, no speeches. He opened with King's Pawn, E4. Claire replied immediately, C5. Sicilian defense. Aggressive. Calculated. The match moved fast. Every click of a piece echoed through the silent hall. Move 5. Ethan tried the Olipin variation. Claire countered flawlessly. Move 11. He tried to bait her into an early exchange. She declined. Move 16. A quiet bishop shift that cornered his rook without anyone realizing. And by move 21, he was cornered. Claire moved her queen. Sat back. Checkmate. No fist pump. No smile. She just looked up and said softly, Machines don't dream. People do. The room fell silent. Cameras stopped recording. Reporters blinked. One investor leaned forward and whispered, Who is she? Claire stood, faced the crowd, eyes calm. I didn't play today to beat a CEO, she said. I played because too many of you have forgotten something. She paused. Let it breathe. Artificial intelligence is not about replacing people. It's about amplifying them. But that only works if you remember the people behind the algorithms. You want to invest in the future? Start by seeing who's already building it, even if they're mopping your floors at midnight. Then she left the stage. No handshake. No photos. Just a woman who walked in quietly, and left with every room in that building changed. Backstage, Ethan sat alone, staring at the board. He didn't feel humiliated. He felt humbled. And for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about quarterly growth or market valuation. He was thinking about what it meant to be truly human, and what he had missed all this time, looking at data but never the people behind it. It didn't take long. The clip of Claire defeating Ethan Vale hit 2.3 million views in under 24 hours. Twitter exploded with hashtags. Hashtag chessqueen. Hashtag janitorgenius. Hashtag AIVshuman. She was trending everywhere, from Reddit to late-night talk shows. People called her a symbol of hidden brilliance, the new face of ethical tech, even the ghostwriter of the future. But with virality comes scrutiny, and the internet doesn't let anyone rise without digging through the dirt beneath their name. On the third day it began. A thread appeared on a popular tech forum. Title: Remember Claire Johnson? The MIT data scandal. Inside was a grainy screenshot from 2014. An article headline: AI researcher resigns amid privacy breach allegations. The post went viral. Users began dissecting the old story. How Claire had once been a rising star. How she allegedly gave unauthorized access to proprietary research. How no one had been prosecuted, but she quietly resigned and disappeared. People weren't asking how she beat the AI anymore. They were asking if she had ever deserved to be there in the first place. The comments turned sharp. Was she even qualified? Is this redemption or just good PR? Seems like a calculated comeback. News anchors who praised her just days earlier were now inviting panels to debate her ethics. And Claire, she watched it unfold from the break room at Orion, coffee in hand, eyes on a screen where strangers argued about the worst mistake of her life. Ethan tried to call. Twice. She didn't answer. Because this time, she didn't have the energy to defend herself. Not again. Not after all these years. She walked out of Orion that evening without telling anyone. Left her badge on the front desk. Took the service elevator, not the front lobby. By the time she reached the sidewalk, she wasn't angry. She was exhausted. Because for every victory, the world demanded a price. And hers, it seemed, was to keep paying for a past she didn't write, just one she refused to erase. But Claire wasn't done. Not yet. Because somewhere inside the noise, someone out there still needed to see her win. Not for the headlines, but for the silence that came afterward, the kind that said, she didn't just survive. She mattered. Ethan Vale had never set foot on the MIT campus. He'd donated money, sure. Sponsored a think tank here and there. But he'd always kept his distance from the academic world. Too slow, too theoretical. He liked building things, launching fast, proving results. But now, here he was, standing under gray skies outside the glass and steel curves of the Stata Center, holding a coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. He wasn't here as a CEO. He was here chasing a ghost. Inside, he met with Dr. Miriam Kwan, the longtime director of MIT's Artificial Intelligence Research Division. Her office was everything he expected. Bookshelves stacked to the ceiling, awards collecting dust, and a whiteboard so dense with logic diagrams it made his head spin. "You're looking into Claire Johnson?" she asked without preamble, setting her glasses down on a thick manila folder. "I need to know what really happened." Dr. Kwan gave him a long, measured look. "She never told you?" "She never told anyone," Ethan replied. Kwan nodded slowly. "There was a leak," she began. "A serious one. Experimental emotional modeling data. Still in raw form. It ended up on a private forum. Within hours, it was being dissected by engineers across 5 countries." Ethan leaned forward. "And Claire? She was the lead researcher at the time. The data was downloaded using her access credentials." He felt his chest tighten. That's what the report said. But what they didn't say, Kwan continued, was that Claire wasn't the one who used those credentials. Ethan blinked. Then who did? A junior researcher. Someone she was close with at the time. He took the data without her knowledge. And when the board asked Claire to explain, she refused to name him. Why? Because his father sat on the Institute's endowment committee. Because dragging him into the light would have meant destroying more than just one career. Ethan shook his head in disbelief. She took the fall to protect him? She took the fall to protect the research, the funding, the people who depended on the project. Dr. Kwan reached into the folder and pulled out a single piece of paper. Her resignation letter. Quiet. Professional. No blame. No explanation. Ethan read it. His throat tightened. It was elegant, humble, unforgiving. She disappeared because she thought no one would listen, he said quietly. Dr. Kwan met his eyes. Back then she was right. The silence between them stretched long. Finally, Ethan stood. Thank you, he said. She was one of the finest minds we ever had, Kwan replied. We just realized it too late. That night, back in a modest hotel just off Massachusetts Avenue, Ethan sat by the window, looking out over the Charles River. He opened his laptop, pulled up Claire's name. No press draft. No PR spin. Just a blank message box. He typed, "You were right to stay silent. But I was wrong to let the world fill in the blanks. Let's rewrite the ending. Together." But he didn't send it. Not yet. Because real change, he realized, wasn't made in grand gestures or viral videos. It started when you stopped talking and started showing up. Tomorrow he would. The ballroom of the Grand Hyatt in San Francisco had never been this quiet. Rows of suits, scientists, and screens filled the space. Tech giants were present. Google, Huawei, Tesla AI. Global media crews stood on risers with boom mics hovering like vultures. At the center, 2 raised stages, each with a team, each flanked by a monitor showing their AI's calculations in real time. This was it. The 2040 International AI Invitational. A battle of code. A war of logic. The Olympics of artificial intelligence. Team USA sat at one table, their lead representative hunched over a digital console, sweat darkening his collar. On the opposite side, Team China, their algorithm known only as Xuanhe, an emotion tracking engine trained on more than 1 billion social interactions across 5 continents. Both sides had to solve a series of high-pressure chess scenarios using their AI engines, live, under scrutiny, and in real time. Ethan Vale watched from the sidelines, arms crossed, jaw tight. He wasn't part of the official team, just a sponsor, they said. A face. A funder. But hidden backstage, away from the cameras and the spotlight, was the real advantage no one knew about. Claire Johnson. She hadn't agreed to appear. She refused microphones, photos, or even her name on the program. But she was there. In a dim side room with a single screen and a hot plate coffee maker, her fingers flew over a battered laptop. She wasn't controlling the AI. She was rebalancing its emotional filters, live, correcting in milliseconds what teams had spent years trying to guess. USA's AI was called Centra, a sentiment-driven engine Claire had quietly overhauled in the weeks leading up to the competition. Now, it was about to face its most brutal test yet. Round 1 began. Xuanhe cracked the board in 38 seconds. A perfect trap. Centra lagged. Claire didn't flinch. She rerouted its interpretive matrix. Let it feel the rhythm instead of brute-forcing logic. Result: 35 seconds. The room blinked. Round 2. Xuanhe predicted a 6-move endgame, flagged it as high confidence. Centra paused. Claire whispered, "Trust the silence." It did. 32 seconds. The crowd began murmuring. Analysts stared. A CNBC commentator whispered, "This isn't the same engine we tested last month." Claire smiled. Barely. Final round. A scenario impossible to brute force. The setup required recognizing emotional misdirection in a user's behavior, the kind of thing only humans usually caught. Xuanhe failed. It flagged the board as neutral, made a safe move. Centra hesitated, then played a sacrifice. It was bold, uncalculated, borderline irrational. But it worked. Checkmate. The ballroom erupted. Flashes. Screams. Applause. Team USA stood in disbelief. Claire closed her laptop gently, unplugged the charger, and stood without a word. She didn't wait for praise. She slipped out through a service hallway, past the banquet kitchen, and onto the empty street behind the hotel. But Ethan was already there, waiting. He didn't speak, just held up a phone. The screen showed the final scoreboard. USA, champion. Claire nodded once, eyes soft. "I didn't do it for the flag," she said. "I know," Ethan replied. "You did it because you still believe in the game." She looked out at the city, the buildings, the world that never stopped spinning no matter who won. "No," she said quietly. "I did it so the next girl like me doesn't have to play from the shadows." And with that, she walked off into the night. No stage, no trophy, just the truth finally proving itself, in front of the entire world. 6 months later, the buzz had faded. The headlines were gone. The Twitter threads were buried beneath trending gossip. But something far more important had taken root, quietly, steadily, like a seed cracking open beneath cold soil. In the heart of Oakland, California, nestled between a used bookstore and a family-run bakery, stood a small building with freshly painted blue trim and a sign that simply read, "Code for Kids." No neon, no sponsor logos, just words that meant something. Inside, the air buzzed not with press conferences, but with curiosity. Plastic chairs, scuffed tables, old laptops donated by tech companies who hadn't bothered to ask where they were going, and a woman in jeans and a hoodie, chalk on her hands, smile at the ready. Claire Johnson, not a celebrity, not a CEO, just a teacher again. Her students came from all over, low-income neighborhoods, foster care systems, single-parent homes. Some walked in shy, guarded. Others were loud, restless, hiding trauma in every loud breath. But all of them had one thing in common. They'd been overlooked, just like she once was. Claire didn't start with code. She started with story. Every lesson began with a question. What do you wish existed in the world? A better bus app. A game that doesn't cheat. A program that reminds grandma to take her meds. And then she taught them how to build it. Line by line. Bug by bug. Sometimes the code didn't run. Sometimes kids gave up. But Claire never raised her voice. She just waited, and when they were ready, handed them the keyboard again. "You're allowed to break things," she'd say. "That's how we learn what's worth fixing." The room had no trophies, but the walls were lined with handwritten quotes. "You belong here. Your ideas matter. Fail loud, try again louder." On Wednesdays, they had Fix It Hour, where students debugged each other's projects like tiny CTOs. On Saturdays, local devs volunteered, and snacks came from the bakery next door. And once a month, Claire brought in one guest speaker. Never famous, always real. Like the mechanic who automated his invoices with Python, or the nurse who built an app to track patient smiles. Because the goal wasn't just code, it was connection. And one evening, after the students had gone home, Claire sat alone, wiping down the whiteboard. Ethan stopped by. Still in his suit, still late from some meeting. "You never let me donate," he said. "You already did," she replied, glancing at the old Orion laptop in the corner. He looked around the room. "You built something bigger than any of us," he said. Claire smiled. "Just a little." "I didn't build it alone," she said. "I just left the door open." And on the wall behind her, under the flickering lights, a new quote had been added in marker. "Every coder starts as a blank screen. What you write next is yours to choose." The sun was setting over Lake Merritt. Golden light spilled across the sidewalk, turning every parked car into a flash of amber and shadow. Inside the modest classroom at Code for Kids, the hum of laptops had gone quiet. The whiteboard was half erased. A bowl of Skittles sat untouched on the teacher's desk. Claire stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the last few kids wave goodbye to their parents out front. Behind her, the door creaked open. Ethan stepped in. He looked different tonight. No blazer, no tie. Just a navy pullover and sneakers that looked far too new for someone who claimed to walk everywhere. Claire didn't turn around. "You're late," she said. "You're always early," he replied. A pause. Then, softly, "So, this is where it ended up." Claire nodded. Not exactly the boardroom you imagined. He smiled faintly. Honestly, it's better. Another pause. He took a step forward. I've been thinking, Ethan said, about that night. The first match. The room. The silence. The humiliation. Claire raised an eyebrow, half amused. That's not a memory most people bring up fondly. I'm not most people. No, she said. You're not. They stood in quiet for a moment. The kind that didn't need filling. Then he asked, gently, do you regret it? Claire looked at him. The years. The silence. The second chances that took a decade too long to come. Which part? She asked. Losing everything? Cleaning floors? Watching my own code get paraded around like someone else's trophy? He didn't flinch. She softened. No, she said. Because it got me here. To a classroom with flickering lights and borrowed laptops? She smiled. To kids who think in logic before they doubt themselves. Yeah, I'd take that over applause any day. Ethan nodded. Still, he said after a beat, I'd like to play one more game. No cameras. No audience. Claire raised an eyebrow. What's the wager? He shrugged. Just one question. And if you win, you have to answer. And if I win? Ethan smiled. Then I finally stopped trying to figure you out. Claire walked to the back cabinet, pulled out a travel board. Old, frayed at the corners, pieces nicked with use. She set it between them. You open, she said. And as the pieces clicked into motion, the night outside grew quiet. Just two players. No press. No past. Just the game. And everything still left to say. Her name was Jasmine. 11 years old. Hair in tight braids. Hoodie 2 sizes too big. She first appeared at the edge of the code for kids' classroom like a shadow, hovering near the doorway with a plastic grocery bag clutched to her chest. Claire noticed her the first time because she didn't ask for anything. She just stood there. Silent. Watching. After a week of quiet hovering, Claire walked over and offered her a chair. You don't have to talk, Claire said. But you can sit. Jasmine nodded. Didn't speak. Didn't touch the laptop. But the next day, she came back. And the day after that. By the third week, she started sitting next to the other kids. Still silent, but now scribbling notes on napkins, candy wrappers, anything she could find. Claire finally handed her an old Chromebook. Wanna try? Jasmine shrugged, but her hands moved like they'd been waiting for this moment. Within hours, she rewrote the tutorial game's logic, eliminating bugs the dev team had missed. Claire watched in stunned silence. No ego. No theatrics. Just instinct. Turned out, Jasmine had been living in the back of a city bus with her older brother for nearly a year. No address. No school ID. No internet, except from the library Wi-Fi they stole while pretending to do homework. But every time she looked at code, she didn't just understand it. She translated it. Claire began giving her side lessons. Late nights. Early mornings. Weekends. She snuck her bagged lunches and stashed flash drives full of resources Jasmine could study offline. By the end of that year, Jasmine had built a language-learning chatbot in Python with zero internet access. It worked, and it spoke, in 5 languages. Claire nominated her for a scholarship to a private STEM school. They hesitated. No address, no legal guardian on file. Claire wrote a letter. 4 pages. When they called back, their only question was, can she start next week? At orientation, Jasmine stood in front of a microphone, cheeks flushed, backpack too heavy. When asked how she learned to code, she answered simply, a lady who believed I could. And that night, as Claire closed up the classroom, she looked at the whiteboard where Jasmine had written her final project's mission. Build something that helps someone invisible feel seen. Claire smiled, because she already had. It wasn't really about chess. Not the opening moves. Not the endgames. Not even the quiet precision that Claire brought to every square of the board. It was about visibility. Because in rooms built by power, filled with resumes, titles, and polished speeches, the people who sweep the floors are almost always invisible. Claire Johnson changed that, not with a protest or a viral speech, but with presence, with consistency, with code. And maybe that's the part we miss too often. That some revolutions don't come with fire or slogans. Some come with late nights, rewritten functions, and the courage to sit down when no one invited you to. Claire's story reminds us that brilliance doesn't always wear badges. It doesn't always go viral. Sometimes it waits, silently, watching, holding its breath until the moment someone finally looks close enough to notice the pattern. And even then, it still has to prove itself again, and again, and again. Because the world doesn't always reward resilience right away, but it notices it, eventually. And what Claire taught, without ever saying it outright, is that our value isn't in how loudly we speak, but in how intentionally we build. Whether it's a line of code, a child's confidence, or a second chance offered when no one else believes you deserve one. She didn't chase the stage. She built one for others to stand on. She didn't demand recognition. She gave it, to students with shaky hands, to teammates with broken pasts, to girls with questions no one had ever taken the time to answer. And when the cameras finally turned her way, she turned them towards someone else. That's not weakness. That's legacy. Because long after the trophies are forgotten, after the articles fade into search history and the applause dies down, what remains? The programs that run because of her logic, the kids who dream bigger because of her example, the silence she filled with substance. And maybe the greatest truth is this: you don't have to burn the system to rewrite it. Sometimes you just have to outthink it, line by line, move by move, one quiet checkmate at a time. So if you're listening to this, and you've ever felt overlooked, outnumbered, or underestimated, remember Claire. Not because she beat a CEO, not because she outsmarted a billion-dollar algorithm, but because she stayed when it would have been easier to disappear. Because she turned being forgotten into a kind of fuel. And because somewhere between the broom closet and the code base, she decided, I still matter. And she did. More than most of us ever will.